and begin to get better and better at over the course of time. So Kaihan, I'm going to turn it over to you, bud.
All right, great. The book that I'm going to give you an overview of today is called Outthink the Competition. So if any of the books are interesting to you and you want to get one, that would be that one. So I'm going to jump right in. You have a workbook from Petra that walks you through my process. I call it the Outthinker process. I've been developing this for maybe 20 years almost and refining it. We've run this hundreds and hundreds of times. And companies that go through the process, they typically accelerate their growth rate by 50%. So if you're growing 20%, then for the next 3 years, you should be growing at 30%. And it's generated a little over $2.5 billion in new revenue. Not having anything to do with me, you don't need me. I'm going to give you what you need. So I'm going to really quickly orient you to the workbook, and so that you're going to be able to apply this either on your own or with a coach. So how does this fit into the one-page plan? Let's start with that. If you take these parts of the one-page plan, which are really about your purpose and long-term goals, then the question is, well, what goes in these boxes? What should your 3 to 5 year priorities be? What should your annual priorities be? And sometimes you just look at that empty box and you fill in what comes to mind. And this is a process to help you and your team step out into the future and really come up with ideas that are more disruptive, more innovative, that will surprise your competition. The core idea here is that we want to start outthinking the competition, not out muscling or out executing them only. This is Ray Kroc, founder of modern day McDonald's. He said, my attitude was that competition can try to copy my style, but they can't read my mind. So I'll leave them 1.5 miles behind. So what he's talking about, and what all these innovators that build really substantial businesses try to do, is create a flow of ideas that delight your customers, but that your competitors will be slow to copy. And why would your competitors be slow to copy? Is because they will view the idea as something that they want to ignore and laugh at. And so what we want to do is we want to come up with ideas that will surprise our competition. And there are several steps in your strategic conversations that lead you away from the really disruptive ideas. And so if you follow these 5 steps, and the workbook follows these 5 steps one by one, you will, with a 95% probability, have a disruptive idea that could be transformative to your business. So the first step is to imagine the future. So step out into the future and imagine what it might look like and what you want to be in that future. The next step is to dissect your business model. Then you, having chosen which elements of the business model you want to focus on this year or the next 3 years, it's to expand your strategic options. And then you analyze and choose from those options. And after you've chosen, then you sell your strategy to employees, to investors. In your case, you're way ahead of the game, because if you're using the one-page plan, what comes out of this just plugs right into the one-page plan. Excuse me. So imagining the future. So what we want to do is we want to think like great chess players, right? Great chess players think 10 moves out and then work backward from there to figure out what you should do to position yourself for checkmate. I'm not a very good chess player. So what I just tend to do is I push my chess pieces forward, hoping that somehow I'll get you into checkmate. And unfortunately, many of us, I would say most companies, play the game of strategy the way I play chess. Their strategic goals are set with a conversation that looks something like this. Here we are today. How did we get here? What are our issues? What are our strengths? And given that, what is a near-term but reasonable but stretched set of goals, right? We've been growing at 5%, could grow at 10%. We have an NPS score. Well, I guess with you guys, I should be saying we're growing at 30%, could be growing at 35%. We have an NPS score of 55, could we get to 60? And the problem with setting strategy in that way is the goal that you end up setting will always be consistent with what you know to do now and what you have been doing. And it doesn't force us to therefore break our thinking and think differently. Instead, in the workbook, what I suggest you do, sit down with your team. This will take 30 to 60 minutes, especially if you already have your BHAG and your vision. This can go very quickly. You step out 10 years from now and say, what is the mess? What is an undesirable but realistic potential future that we might be headed for? And the goal here is to create a sense of urgency in your team, to get them to say, hey, even though things are going great, this is not the future that we really want. And there's risk in that future. So it is worth thinking differently. And then you're holding yourself still out 10 years from now. You're really zooming out like further than most strategists do, and say, what are the future trends that are shaping the environment? What are the technological trends, the socio-demographic trends, the macroeconomic trends, the regulatory, political trends, and what does that mean the future could look like? And then still standing 10 years from now, think about, what do I want to be? What do we want to be? We want to be the number one X. We want to be the place that employees want to work for. They're scrambling to get to work with us. Customers love us, that kind of thing. And then you step backward from there. So you notice how the arrow is going the opposite way. You step backward from the future and say, given that, what must be true in the near term, the next year, 18 months, 3 years, what must be true for us to know that we're on the path to achieving a long-term goal, and then convert that into a strategic question. So in your workbook, 5 simple steps: define the mess, identify your top trends, create your ideal future, clarify your near-term goals, and then convert that into a strategic question. And that way, you'll now have the right strategic question that will, if you answer it, will have you achieve what you maybe started this business to achieve. Then the next step is dissect. And the idea here is that we often look in the same areas of our business for growth, right? Every year we look at sales strategies, or every year we look at product strategies. And what there are actually lots of different avenues for us to explore for growth. And so what we want to do is we want to look across 8 different areas. And when we start innovating across multiple areas of the business model, that's where the scaling usually begins. So Apple, for example, I went back and tracked their revenue from the time of their founding, 1970, and you see that they, around 2002, 2003, 2004, they hit this scaling point. Amazon figured out this trick much earlier. If we line up Amazon and Apple's revenue from the one being the point of founding, you see that Amazon started scaling much more quickly. And if you look at their strategy, Apple's really focused on product and promotion for much of its career. Amazon started innovating across physical experiences. They have the like button. You can like products, that you can put stuff into your shopping cart for forever. They started Amazon Web Services. They introduced Amazon Prime. They're innovating across lots of different dimensions of your business. It's almost like you have a growth engine that's an 8-cylinder, V8 8-cylinder, and we're only running on a few cylinders. What we want to do is explore ways to get all cylinders working for us. So there are 8 areas that you can look at. The first is positioning, which is, who is your core customer and what should our brand mean to them? So if you were looking at growing this year, maybe you would really focus on just that. What does our brand, how do we optimize our brand for our core customer? You might want to look at products. What new products should I offer? What new service attributes should I offer? What should I outperform on? And therefore, what should I underperform on? You could look at pricing strategies. What new pricing strategies could I introduce? And I'm not talking here about, being high or low price. I'm talking about being differently priced, changing the basis of pricing. Maybe you could look at placement. What are new ways to distribute our product or service? Where could we place our stores? Could we go online? What are new channel partners that we could use to reach more customers? You could also be looking at promotion strategies. Well, how do I get through marketing and sales? How do I get customers aware? How do I get them to consider? How do I get them to choose? How do I get them through the funnel? But you could also be looking at your internal processes and operations, the core processes that you use to deliver your value proposition. Could you innovate there? Could you improve there? Could you take 7 steps and turn them into 5 steps? You could also be looking at the physical experience that you deliver to your customer service. And this is one area that I find that people often overlook or underappreciate. And then at the bottom, I put it at the bottom, not because it's the least important, but because increasingly it's the most important, is people, your people strategy. Who do we hire? How do we organize ourselves? Could we change our incentive structures? And what should our cultural values be? Right. And so we just heard an example of how to accentuate cultural values. And the whole idea here is that we myopically look at just a few of these, and we don't strategically choose what the best one is to focus on, because we have a tendency to look in the area that we already know well. And so what we want to do is we want to start looking for innovations across all of these, strategic moves across all of these. And when you do that, magic happens. Lemonade Insurance, I think, is a good example of this principle. They grew from basically zero to $100 million in 3 years. They went public last year, very successful IPO. And if we look at their strategy, what we'll see is that they come up with different choices across all dimensions of the business model. Under positioning, they sell insurance, rentals insurance, and they sell it primarily to first-time buyers. They also have a mission of transforming insurance from a necessary evil into a social good. They also are a B corporation. So now you start seeing they're building this business with a very different positioning about being a good insurance company. And there are probably no other insurance companies that can claim that positioning. So then what do they do to support that positioning? Well, they have real clear fee transparency, and they donate excess premium. So when you rent when you rent an apartment, you might buy some renter's insurance, and you go to their website and you choose a number of charities that you like. And then what they tell you is, you're going to pay us a premium, and we're going to take 25% of that premium to fund for our operations. Any premium that is left and goes unclaimed, we will donate to the charity of your choice. So that's both fee transparency, and it also supports this idea of being a good company. And their processes are completely different. They use smart contracts so that when you place a claim, and by the way you do a claim is you take a video, show your broken toilet, and explain what happened, and the community can look at that and just sort of create some social pressure to really do the right thing. But when you want to get insurance, it takes you about 3 minutes, and you interact with an AI. When you do a claim, it takes like 3 seconds, and you also do that with an AI. Under product, their product is insurance, but it also is a sense of community, belonging to this community of users. Under promotion, they do, it's almost all digital marketing. They don't have a sales force. Under placement, it's an all digital experience. They don't have physical places. They don't have, they don't go through insurance offices. They've also done a really good job at delivering a superior user experience. And then under people, they have a number of really interesting policies, like they have 20 days PTO, unlimited sick leave, fully covered medical and dental, a whole number of things. And all these things kind of build on each other to create a very different business and very different business model. So in step 2, what I suggest you do, and this probably takes about 30 minutes, you sit down with your team and you work through each of these P's, and you say, is this a weakness? Is it neutral, or is it an advantage to us, our current state, given where we want to go? And then pick 1 to 3 areas to focus on strategically. So now you've said, long term, this is what I want to be. And then you say, and to get there, I want to focus on these 3 areas. Let's call it positioning, people, and processes. I'm just making that up. Now you know what your strategic focus areas are. Next step is to now generate lots of strategic options to use those leverage points for you to achieve your near-term goal and thereby your long-term goal. And the real question here is, how do great strategists see these winning moves? Alexandra Kostanuk, she was the reigning women's world chess champion when I interviewed her. She does something as a marketing stunt. If you saw the Queen's Gambit, you've seen a similar scene where they line up a whole bunch of players, and she just goes from one round to the next round to the next round. She looks at the board, she sees the winning move. How can she do that? Well, research into expertise and expert performance basically says this because you don't use logic in this stage, you use patterns. And master chess players recognize twice as many patterns as experts. Grandmasters recognize 10 times as many. In this methodology that I've developed, I believe there are 36 fundamental strategic patterns. In the back of your workbook, you've got a description of each one and a question that you can ask to apply it. Now, you never get to use all 36 of these strategic patterns, but there are 5 that my research say are particularly important to use today. So I'm going to briefly go through these and so that you can understand them, so you can go and do it. But also, if ideas pop up as I'm speaking, I really encourage you to write them down as they come up. When we do this in a little bit of longer form, 95% of people say that they walk out of here with a strategic option that could be transformative to their business. So maybe the next 20 minutes, you're going to find your big winning move. So the first is move early to the next battleground. It basically says, what if we don't play for today, but instead we play for tomorrow? What if we don't skate to where the puck is? What if we skate to where the puck will be? And this is particularly important today because cycle times are increasing. We can no longer put a strategy in place and wait 10 years for our next strategic move to come to us. We already need to be playing for tomorrow. And what that means is the kind of like long-term strategic thinking that used to be available only to big corporations with big R&D budgets that could be very patient is now available to many of us. PillPack, as an example, was created by a second-generation pharmacist. He's working at his dad's pharmacy, and he realized that people who had multiple prescriptions had a terrible time at the drugstore. They would have to leave their house multiple times. They'd come home with these bottles that they couldn't open. They got confused. Compliance was low. And so he said, okay, let me just imagine, what should the long-term future of prescription drug delivery look like? First of all, you shouldn't leave your home. Drugs should be delivered to you. Second, they shouldn't come in separate bottles based off of the type of pill or the manufacturer. They should already come pre-sorted. And in the top right of your screen, you see a little plastic bag, and it says ADM Monday. Those are the 3 pills that this person has to take. So one guy partners with another guy, they raise some money, they build this business, and 6 years later sell it to Amazon for $1 billion. So $1 billion in value creation from this kind of thinking. Where is the next battleground, and what could you do to move there early now? So where this fits is you would pick that, and in your workbook, starting on page 42, you just start writing ideas down. One tip is make sure you number the ideas. We want every idea to have a unique number. That'll pay off later. The next paradigm that we start seeing in strategy is moving away from power coming from control towards power coming from coordination, coordinating the uncoordinated. Birds fly in flocks, fish swim in schools, animals travel in herds. They create power and safety by coordinating themselves. And many of the business models, these platform business models that we admire today, are really examples of coordinating things that you don't control. Uber doesn't own the cars, and Airbnb doesn't own the rooms. Nursio doesn't contract the doctors. Wyzant doesn't contract the tutors. We see this same platform business model in lots of different industries. But I don't want you to think that this is necessarily a technology play. One of our clients is a publisher, and they were worried about self-published authors. These are people that would write a book, and they couldn't get a publishing contract, so they'd put a PDF on Amazon, and they were successful. And it used to be that this publisher would go to them and say, congratulations on your success. We'd like to publish your next book. And the author would jump at the chance to get published by a real author. But increasingly, these authors were saying, I don't know if I need you anymore. And so they thought, well, how could we coordinate would-be self-published authors? They came up with this idea, became Fierce Reads. It's a platform where would-be self-published authors can submit manuscripts before they're even finished. And then they have a community that they've coordinated of readers who then give them feedback on their manuscripts. It's almost like they're co-creating the manuscripts. And then it shifts into a competition where the readers rate the manuscripts according to heat, tears, laughs, and thrills. And the top 10 become the top 5, become the top 3, much like Dancing with the Stars. Macmillan picks the winner, and the winner, of course, gets a publishing contract. Technology spend on this was not significant. This is really about understanding, cultivating community. And that requires shifting away from the idea that you create power from control. So it's really helpful to sit down with your team, 7 to 10 minutes, and say, looking around the system that we're competing in, who or what would we like to coordinate? So hopefully we see, like, if you start thinking this way, you start thinking differently than your competition. You're playing for tomorrow rather than today. You're coordinating rather than controlling. Excuse me. The next lens is force a two-front battle. And this is basically says that successful companies today less often define themselves by their industry. They define themselves by a purpose or a capability, something else that has them behave differently. I got a chance to speak to Howard Bihar. He was Howard Schultz's right-hand man at Starbucks as they grew from 50 stores to 15,000 stores. And I asked him, what were your fourth options? And he said, well, there were many, but a lot of them came from this realization that we are not in the coffee business serving people. Instead, we are in the people business serving coffee. And what he means by that is our core customer is not the person that comes in like you and I to Starbucks looking for a cup of coffee. It's the person in the green apron that's serving us the coffee. Once they put that hat on, they started making lots of decisions differently, like giving health insurance to all workers, even part-time workers. Well, if you're in the people business, that makes sense. That's a value add. But if you're in the coffee business, that sounds like a cost. Giving equity to all employees, that makes sense if you're in the people business. It doesn't make so much sense if you're in the coffee business. So we want to really manage what business our team thinks they're in. Peter Drucker, he said, strategy is simply the answer to what business are you in? And he says it's never an easy question to answer. Another example of this is Flatiron Health. It's a company whose mission is to improve lives by learning from the experience of every cancer patient. It was created by two guys. They created a company, they sold it to Google, they did their mandatory 3 years, and then they left looking for some other business to start. And the nephew of one of them, unfortunately, got cancer. And so this gentleman helped the nephew navigate through his meetings with oncologists and his treatment plan. He realized the system's really broken because an oncologist treats you, but then they don't know how that treatment went, because when you go back to visit them, they don't remember what they did with you, because it's all written in paper. So it's not digitized, not easily accessible. Or then you go to another oncologist and that oncologist doesn't know what the first oncologist did for you as treatment. So he said, let's create this company, Flatiron Health. It looks like a practice management software company. So they go to an oncologist and they say, we will we'll license you this practice management software. And it'll allow you to track your treatments. It'll allow you to book patients, do everything. But we are really a data company. And so what we'd like to do is we'd like to have access to your data, and we're going to analyze it and give you insights into how your treatments, what treatments are working, what's not working. Of course, we're going to be fully compliant of the rules and law. So this oncologist jumps at the opportunity for this great service. They go to the next oncologist and they say, we're going to give you the same deal as that oncologist, but we're going to give you insights not just from your practices, but from the other oncologist practices. And so that oncologist jumps on it. They roll up 2,000 of these oncology practices, and then 7 years later, sell it to Roche Pharmaceuticals for over $2 billion. So $2 billion in value creation by sticking with this self-identity of being a data company rather than a practice management software company. One of my clients, I worked with them when they were 30 million. They're kind of an accounting firm, they're accounting staffing firm. And originally they thought of themselves as a CPA firm. But through this work, they realized we really are a leadership firm. And I don't have time here to go into what all the implications of this are, but once they shifted that mindset, they started behaving differently. They developed a leadership development program, both for their clients and for their staff. They changed the way they did staffing. They changed their incentive structure. And then over the next 6 years, they grew from 30 million to 250 million. So this is very powerful, to think strategically of what business you are really in, and then ask, how would that kind of company behave differently? Next pattern. So we're playing for tomorrow rather than today. We're coordinating rather than controlling. We're not defining ourselves by our industry. Hopefully you see those three lenses already have you behaving very differently than your competition. But the next lens to layer on top of that is to be good. And the idea is that people used to believe that corporations existed to maximize profits and shareholder value, but increasingly companies realize that if you just focus on shareholder value, you create resistance to your growth, and that can diminish your value. A smarter strategy is one that benefits multiple stakeholders. When your growth is good for the community, for employees, for the government, the country, the environment, the world, that's kind of the ultimate strategy, because everyone wants you to win. And we've already talked about Lemonade Insurance, but just kind of showing why this works for them. Again, they grew to 100 million in 3 years. What 3 elements of their strategy is: one, they are a B Corp, not a traditional corporation. Actually, many of the IPOs last year were B Corps. More companies are converting into B Corps. Their mission, as I said before, to transform insurance from a necessary evil into a social good, and the donating of all those excess premiums to charity. Another company I really love is called Stockpile. They sell stock, but not to adults, they sell it to children. And the goal is not just a financial return on your investment, but also to teach financial literacy. So, you know, I'm a first generation American. I lived on free and reduced lunch my entire life. We were on and off food stamps. My family, and I'm doing more than fine financially now, but my family didn't introduce strong financial literacy to me. And so I'm surely I lost a couple of years after college. I got that credit card I shouldn't have gotten, or spent that money I shouldn't have spent. And I'm committed that my kids don't lose those same years. So I buy them these gift certificates, and it's really beautiful interface made for kids. They can take their gift card, they can pick out what they want to invest in, and they start relating to these brands. Like Amazon isn't just a place to spend stuff, but they become owners of it. So this, if you analyze their strategy across the 8 Ps, you see, similar to Lemonade, they made unique choices across all of the Ps because they were aligned behind being good. So really powerful to spend 7 to 10 minutes or more if you can with your team and say, how can we create strategic power by being good? What can we stop doing that's bad? What can we start doing that's good? What if we just more authentically and loudly communicate the good that our growth does in the world? And how can we align our business model, how we make profits, how we charge, how can we align that to doing good? And the last one, create something out of nothing, really powerful. It plays on the fact that we tend to play the game of business following a rule that doesn't exist. And that rule is that you have to play with the pieces on the board, right? You can't take a queen out of your back pocket and put it next to my king. But there are other types of games. In some countries in Asia, the analog to chess is Go. And in Go, the rules are the opposite. In Go, you cannot move the pieces on the board. You can only add and remove them. So what if we could just add or remove things instead of focusing on what's already there? One thing that's great to add is a customer. Tony Fernandez did this in 2001. He quit his job. He was an accountant. He bought an airline. It cost him 27 cents because the airline was bankrupt. And today it's the second largest discount airline in the world. And his core strategic concept was, let's not compete for airline customers. Instead, let's get railroad customers to enter the market. Let's add them to the market. And if you look down the 8 Ps again, across many of them, they adjusted their choices to this strategy. For example, not putting airlines in major hubs, but instead in smaller airports that are closer to railroads. When you see non-consumption, someone who should be using your product or service, but they're not, it's usually for one of 4 reasons. 1, price. They can't afford it, or they don't think they can afford it. 2, they don't have access to it. 3, they lack the know-how. Maybe they are intimidated by calling you because they don't think they know what they need to know, or time. I've got a full-time job. I've got 3 kids. I do not have time to visit your car wash, to visit your shop, or to visit your, to go to your website. So the great thing to do is to find these people who are non-consumers and just have some conversations with them to try to find out which of these are the ones that are in place. Another great thing to introduce is a category. Gatorade created the category of sports drink. Red Bull created the category of energy drink. Another thing that I'm seeing across lots of companies, I get to work across lots of industries. We also run a peer group of chief strategy officers across lots of industries. And I see this same creation of category across lots of different sectors, creating something as a service. So Salesforce was the first to create software as a service. Netflix beat Blockbuster in part because they offered entertainment as a service. They weren't renting individual DVDs. Rolls-Royce for many years now has been selling propulsion as a service. Blue Apron and these other box, services are really, you're not buying a tomato, you're buying a flow of food. BMW and Mercedes, they recently took their mobility as a service businesses and they combine them into a new company, mobility as a service. One of my friends and clients, they have a company that sells drugs for animal health, for cows, for example. And what they're shifting to is, instead of selling the drugs, they're selling healthy cows as a service. So the pricing is, we'll give you these drugs for free, and we will participate in the upside of the yield of your herd. So these are just a few examples, but if you had a magic wand and you could add anything to the game, what would you like to add to the game? So these are the 5 that I suggest you use. There are also another 31 in your workbook that you can play around with. And the steps are really simple. It starts on page 42, 43, 44. And at the back of the workbook on page 49, you have a list of all 36. Look at each one and brainstorm 5 or more ideas per stratagem. Explore other stratagems when you're done with that. Your goal should be at least 40 ideas. Often when you do this and you have enough time, you end up with 100 to 200 ideas. And that's great, because if you have more ideas than your competition, you're more likely to see that move that they don't see. The challenge, of course, is that you can't execute 200 ideas. You don't have the time, the bandwidth. It doesn't make sense to do so anyway. So we need to analyze those ideas and select our priorities. 3 simple ways to do this. Take all your ideas. If they're on Post-it notes, or if you wrote them down with numbers, you use the numbers here, and you plot every single idea. I suggest you include on this things that you are already doing. Is it easy or difficult? And if we did it, would it be high impact or low impact? You're going to find that a lot of the ideas are wastes of time. And that's a beautiful thing, because you can clear that off your plate, remove get those out of your mind, take those resources and invest them more wisely. I promise you that if you include on your list some things you're doing, you're going to find that you are wasting time on and resources on some strategies that are really waste of time relative to your full opportunity set. You'll end up with a bunch of tactics. What I like to do is take those tactics, put them on a back burner list, and every quarter or every month, you go and look down that list and say, here are 5 that we're just going to go do and execute. Then you'll find some winning moves. But what I find is that the really innovative, disruptive idea that will really transform your business, I call these ideas 4th option ideas. They usually appear to be crazy ideas. And the good news for you is that what your competitors are going to do with those ideas is what most people do, is they just laugh them off. They forget them. They thought they were jokes. And the magic is, you spend a little bit of time, I'm not talking about more than 10 minutes, taking a crazy idea and looking at how you can turn it into a winning move. That will be what surprises your competition. And in your workbook, there is a suggested way to do that. And then pick your 4th options. Those become your 3 to 5 year priorities and your 1 year priorities. And in your workbook, this is all on page 45 and 46. So step 1, sort your ideas. Step 2, work on a crazy idea. Step 3, pick 3 to 7 priorities. And then finally, on sell, you are really at advantage if you're working with a Petra coach and you're using a 1-page plan or something like it, because other companies have to go through enormous effort to try to get people to align to these strategic priorities. And instead, you've already got it, right? You just plug them in here, and then the rest of the process rolls out of there, and you align your rocks and your actions and responsibilities. So let me summarize here. 5 steps. 1, imagine the future. Step 2, dissect your business model. Step 3, expand your options. Step 4, analyze, choose your options. Step 5, sell your strategy. So I know this was super fast, but you have the workbook, and I've gone through all the steps. There's nothing more there are no other steps that I haven't covered. And if you want to stay in touch with me, the best way is LinkedIn over here. I also would love if you would check out my podcast, Outthinkers. Every week we drop a new one on the topic of strategy with a strategic thought leader, and on Twitter at Kaihan. So that is what I wanted to share with you.
Brother, this is how you recognize a professional. He knew where he needed to get to. He had a lot of content. He went through the entire thing and he ended on the second that he was supposed to end. So well done. It's like you've done this once or twice before.
I love doing it.
I know you do. And we really appreciate you sharing those thoughts with us. I had a couple of questions and then I'm going to take us to break. I'm going to use this time because I think it's really important. And this is a question. I hope you have like an answer like this, but when you define strategy, if I ask you the question, what is strategy? How do you answer that question?
I ask that question to every single person on my podcast, and these are all strategy professors and strategy experts. I never get the same answer. Get the same answer. But what I like is it is a set of choices that differentiate you from your competitors. The choices that are the same as your competitors, those are executional. And that's about executing as well as your competition. There are a set of choices that are different from your competition.
All right, let's make sure we capture that big and bold somewhere, because I think this is a question that I get asked a lot, and I don't have a really good answer for it. And as you said, defining it is one of those things that is just so amorphous. It's very difficult.
Yeah, it's still an emerging field.
Yeah, for sure. And if there's a lot of stuff to go do in what you presented, there's all those different stratagems, as you call them, and work to be done. If somebody could walk away and just go do one thing next week, what would the one thing be?
Since they're a Petra coach or client or the part of Petra coach, I would just start with the 8 Ps and dissect and look at your business model. What's a strength, what's neutral, what's weakness, and what should I focus on next year to really accelerate me towards whatever my goals are.
All right. So just tearing through those P's in that worksheet and working that.
Yeah.
Awesome, man. Well, listen, let's give Kaihan some love in the chat. Make sure everybody knows how amazing he is. He's got to go get on the stage. So dude, just bring your energy to the stage like you did to us. It'll be an amazing afternoon for those folks.